How far would you need to be pushed before you and your friends took up arms against your local sheriff's department? What's the boundary between government corruption and government tyranny? They say war is hell, but I say the real hell is living a life with no voice, no choice, and no freedom. Well, this became a reality when government tyranny forced 30 men to take up arms against the McMinn County Sheriff's Department in 1946.
Yoo-hoo! I'll make you famous.
Welcome back to the Barber Chair Historian. As always, leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's the easiest way to help my channel, plus it's your tribute to the algorithm gods. And those gods help put my channel on the map, so now back to the video. 10 years prior, this shitbag, E.H. Crum, helped this shitbag, Paul Cantrell, get elected as acting sheriff of McMinn County. This rigged election was known as the vote grab of 1936. Crum owned almost all of McMinn County, so with the local sheriff in his pocket, the man felt untouchable. When Crum wanted someone elected, he'd send the deputies to local polling places to make sure the right boxes were checked. If voter fraud and intimidation wasn't enough for the fine people of McMinn County to revolt, just wait, it's going to get worse.
But wait, there's more!
The sheriffs were paid in an unconventional way. It wasn't salary or alary. It was by the suspect. And I'm sure the well-educated viewer out there can see how this would soon become a problem. Originally, deputies were focusing their efforts on travelers, stopping buses that were just passing through town. And once these buses were stopped, deputies would board them, pulling people out at random for drunken public. Crum's reach stretched further than just the sheriff's department. He owned the local media too. So in essence, the man controlled the local news. So this being said, there wasn't a chance that the local newspapers were going to criticize this shitbag or his dog Cantrell. Most of the young men of McMinn County were off to Europe spreading democracy one unalived Nazi at a time, all while their own homes were under a tyranny of their own. As the veterans returned home, tensions rose between them and deputies because the veterans were coming home with their mustering out pay, which was money from the government for winning the war and starting their new lives in the civilian sector. Kind of think of it as a retirement gift from Uncle Sam. Well, the deputies that were used to extorting travelers were now trying to extort these veterans that had been used to yeeting and deleting a more competent enemy for the last few months. Yeah, this was going to turn out really well for them.
I'm in danger!
The men first tried to take back their homes democratically, having their own man, Knox Henry, a decorated war veteran from the North African campaign, run against Paul Cantrell for local sheriff. They'd conduct their meetings at night, only allowing veterans inside to not allow law enforcement to infiltrate their ranks. They kept these meetings secure by only allowing people in that had a military ID. The men knew Crum and Cantrell would do everything in their power to keep control of the county. So the veterans sent 30 men armed with pistols to the polling places to prevent the deputies from intimidating the voters. Sometimes in history, there are shots that can be heard around the world. The Battle of Lexington and Concord that kicked off the American Revolution, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand that started World War I, or the raid at Fort Sumter that kicked off the American Civil War. Well, this day in 1946 was no different. On the day of voting, an African-American man named Tom Gillespie was denied entry into the Waterworks polling stations. Mr. Gillespie objected to the shady sheriff's demands, so a deputy smacked him with a pair of brass knuckles. Mr. Gillespie then tried to stand up and run away, but the deputy shot him in the back.
Ricky!
No, this didn't fall under Tennessee versus Gardner. This was more like Tennessee versus Gillespie. After the shot was fired, Cantrell ordered the Waterworks polling station to be closed. The militia soon arrived, where two of them were taken into custody by the corrupt deputies. Now, we're not exactly sure what happened next, but what we do know is guns were drawn and a standoff ensued. The two men escaped custody as deputies were dispatched to catch them. But the deputies were taken hostage by the militia, where they were driven miles outside of town and severely beaten. Bill White, one of the leaders of the militia, ordered the men to storm the National Guard Armory to strategically acquire more capable weapons than just 1911s.
Smoke a little.
So the men acquired 60 rifles and a few new Thompson submachine guns. When the polls closed and the voting started, the men learned that during the chaos of the standoff, deputies managed to smuggle some of the voting boxes out of the building and into the county jail. Fearing shenanigans were afoot, The militia took control of the bank across the street. But the men, they weren't here to take money. They were here to take their freedom. Now, the account of how the battle got started is a little cloudy, but what we do know is the men that were in Europe spreading democracy one unalived Nazi at a time were here at the sheriff's doorstep, ready to plant freedom flowers.
Get down here now, you inbred trash!
The battle lasted hours as veterans and deputies traded shots across the street, but the veterans knew that this was an all-or-nothing mission. Because when you're defending your home, your will to fight is stronger than those that are trying to take your home. Not because we're fighting for the sticks and bricks we call a house, but because we're fighting for our wives, our sons, our daughters, and everything we know and love. These men had a reason to fight because they knew if they didn't win today, tomorrow they'd all be rounded up and hung. The men tried to verbally command deputies to come out of the building, but to nobody's surprise, they didn't comply. So they tried to burn them out. But because of the gunfire, nobody can reach them with the Molotov cocktails. During the firefight, an ambulance pulled up to the building, so out of decency, the men stopped firing. Because, of course, they were fully expecting wounded men to get loaded up and transported to the hospital. But instead of wounded men, the coward Cantrell came out sprinting faster than Usain Bolt into the back of the waiting bus. This coward abandoned his men like the piece of shit he was. The firefight ended when two men snuck past gunfire, attaching dynamite to the door like a primitive form of det cord. With the door being blown off its hinges and the militia breaching the building, the deputies had no choice but to drop their weapons and surrender. After the firefight, the men confiscated the stolen ballot boxes, proving that their man Knox Henry had beat Sheriff Paul Cantrell both metaphorically and physically out of office. With 22 men wounded on both sides, miraculously there wasn't a single KIA, and this includes Paul Cantrell and E.H. Crum. For some reason, the men decided to spare them both, allowing them to live the rest of their lives in McMinn County. Now, personally, I think in 1940s Tennessee, hunting accidents happen. The Battle of Athens, Tennessee is a shining beacon as to why we need our Second Amendment rights. Tyranny has happened on American soil, and it needs to know it's not welcome here. The Second Amendment is the teeth of the Constitution. Without it, nothing is there to protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. If you enjoyed my video on small town justice, then please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until next time, see you beautiful bastards in the next video.
Yoo-hoo! I'll make you famous.